Me and my spouse, we're 65 years old. We have nothing saved for retirement. Me and my spouse, we've worked low-income jobs all our lives. We never had the opportunity to invest in a 401, much less put money away in a savings account. We were just living paycheck to paycheck, being able to pay our bills and put food on the table for the family. Now the kids are gone. We are kind of wore out and we want to retire. But we have nothing saved. What do? How do we start? And that's the topic of today's video. Half a day, YouTube. Welcome back to the channel. Chandler's Retirement Life. It's a good life. So just want to remind folks that November, no edit, no script challenge. Right? My goal is 30 and I'm on number 13. And so let's get back to this interesting situation, right? This scenario. And I say it's a scenario, but it's playing out all over the United States, right? There are so many more people that are hitting 65 that just can't retire because they don't have the funds to retire, or they're not sure how to retire. I'm not 100% sure what it is, but a lot of the local media, they've been reporting on this for quite a while. They kept saying that a disaster is coming because there's a lot of people hitting that retirement age that don't have no money. So what happens to them? So let me first say that I am not a financial planner. I am not a retirement guru. There's a lot I don't know. All I am is someone that is retired for 3 years. And I was able to kind of figure it out. And I think you can figure it out too, right? It just takes a little planning. And every plan starts off with an assessment. So what are you assessing? Well, you start off by assessing all your income, all the monies that you have coming in, whether it's your current job, it's maybe a money from a pension, a military retirement, or something else that is out there, right? You and your spouse, everything that's coming in, you got that number. And I would always say, you know what? You do two plans. One plan says, I'm going to retire at 65. And the other plan says, you know what? I'm going to work until 70. Why until 70? Well, we know that between 62 and 70 or 65 and 70, that Social Security check that what you're going to get is going to increase by a certain percent, right? Don't know what it is when you hit there, but it's going to be more than what you're currently making. So that's something to consider, right? So you want to create those two scenarios. So the first scenario says, I want to retire right now. I'm getting ready to turn 65 with the spouse, and we're done. So we start our assessment, right? We start looking at all the liability, all the earned income, all the income that we bring into the house, all right? That's a number. Then we start looking at expenses. What are all our bills, right? And the hope is that your income coming in is a larger number than your expenses going out. And if it's not, well, and you got a problem. And if you've been trying to bridge that gap by utilizing a credit card, well, it's another problem, right? Because at some point, you'll have that maxed out, and then that's going to come due. And then what do, right? You just make things worse. I'd rather see somebody take on a part-time job, right? If they can't make ends meet, you take on a part-time job and earn extra money. And or you look at what expenses you can eliminate, which is the next thing you do, right? So now that you know the number for your income coming in and the number for your expenses, you also got to think about all your assets, right? Everything that you own. You might be living in a house that belonged to grandma and it's paid off, and it's a $1.5 million house, right? And that's a lot of equity. And so now now you really don't have a problem, right? You just have to sell the house or figure out how you can tap into that equity. And there's ways to do that. Um, but if you don't own a house, if you're renting a house, right, or if you do have a house with a mortgage and the mortgage is pretty high, um, then it's something to consider, right? So as we start to look at our assets, I mean, you might own a boat, right? And if the boat is paid for and it's valued at $5,000, then I'd say, you know what? If you're going to retire now, sell the boat. Or even if you're not going to retire now, sell the boat and pay off that credit card, and or pay off whatever revolving debt that you have, right? You want to continue to pay down debt before you actually pull the trigger and retire. So now you're starting to get a clearer financial picture of what retirement would look like if you retired now at 65, or if you waited another 5 years and retired at 70, right? So, each scenario is going to be different, right? Everyone's situation is not the same, although a lot of similarities, right? A lot of people don't have money. A lot of people need a lot of money in order to retire. But everyone's situation is a little different, so it's hard to talk specific about a certain situation. Or what I could talk to is just generalities, right? Just if you're trying to retire and you have no money saved, that's okay. You can still do that. The question comes, can I retire on Social Security alone? Well, how much are you going to get paid Social Security? If you don't know, then log on to www.socialsecurity.gov and take a look. If you don't have an account, create an account. If you don't know how to do that, I got the answer. I made a video to kind of show people how to do that. So you can look at the video and log on there, create an account, and it's going to tell you pretty much what you would make, right? And what your spouse would make. And you can utilize those numbers and plug them into your planning. So now you're planning, if you're going to retire now, you got that number. Or if you were going to work longer, it probably even tell you what that number is going to be if you work 5 more years, right? How about that? That's pretty good for planning. So now you're getting a clearer picture, right? So it's always, knowing financially where you stand. That's the first part, right? Understanding where you're at, what your not boundaries, but where your limits are, right? Where you see an opportunity for you to do better, right? As you war game all these different scenarios, you might find one that is a good match for you, right? And then you can move forward with that if that's what you want to do for retiring at 65. Now, you always talk about reducing expenses. So the first thing that I always tell everybody about when you talk about reducing expenses is you first got to reduce your retirement dream, right? So if you had a retirement dream of, I want to, live in a big house by the ocean, by the lake, in the mountains, well, you probably can't afford that. The biggest cost that most of us have is housing, right? Whether it's an apartment that you have or even a house, right? Whether it's a mortgage or you're renting a house, that's going to be your biggest cost. And so as you're doing your financial planning, figure out what that number is that you can realistically afford to pay. And you don't want to be house poor, meaning you don't want to pay so much that you're in a real comfort house, but then you can't do nothing else, or you're struggled, to buy food because you're paying the rent. So you want to get something that's manageable. So some people when they look at those numbers, they can say, hey, what do we have to do? Because sometimes you have to do with a lot less. I got a friend that they live on Social Security alone. Him and his spouse, they both live on Social Security alone. it's feasible, it's doable. You could do that. There's just a lot of things that you're going to have to manage yourself, right? And figure out what those costs are. And so, what kind of house are you going to live in? Is what can you afford, right? You drill down on that number. Find out as you're doing your financial planning, how much can you afford for housing? And if it's X amount, you say, okay, where's the first place? Well, let's rent a house. It's just two of us. Maybe we don't need a house. Let's rent a one-bedroom apartment. Those are the cheapest, all right? And if you can afford that, maybe that's the direction you go. And if you can't even afford a one-bedroom apartment in your retirement, oh, so then you start looking for something even cheaper. Maybe it's you look for a used RV that you buy, and that's where you live. You live in an RV, in an RV park, all right? A lot of people do that. I know people that live in a makeshift box truck, right? They turned it into a livable area, and that's what they live in, right? They might drive here, drive there, almost like an RV, but that's what they can afford. And a lot of those alternative type of lifestyles are just temporary, right? So that I can catch up on all these bills, pay all these bills, and get my financial situation just a little better, right? And so that's doable. So it all begins with that assessment. So do your assessment, right? Look to ways to eliminate expenses. Consider alternate arrangements. It might even be, you go live with your brother, your sister, your kids. And that's why we got kids, right? We got the kids so that one day they could take care of us, right? When they buy their house, you say, "Hey, make sure you get that room where I come live with you." But those are alternatives, ways of us saving in our retirement, right? Alternative living arrangements. There's so many different ones out there. You just have to see which one is right for you. I know we all want to live independent, but sometimes we got to do what we got to do to make ends meet. And so those are just a couple of tips that I think of. Again, I'd always say, go see a financial advisor. If you find yourself in this predicament, they could probably give you a lot more information on those things that you can do. But if you're like me and you want to do it on your own, you want to figure it out, that's where I'd start. I'd start by doing those two different scenarios. One if I retired now, and one if I retired later on. And this is Chandler's Retirement Live saying, I'm retired now, 3 years, and it's going okay. Lights out.